have you patented this? And I'm like, no.
You know, I won the lotto tomorrow, I'd still be buying a 300 series.
Off his head. He's full on. We don't make anything.
Welcome everyone to Stay Tuned Podcast. I'm Matt Smith from Just Autos. We're running this new platform in our podcast. We're going to get some industry leaders through and interview them and understand where they've started and where they've ended up today. I think they've got some really interesting stories. We also have some race car drivers. We've got some Ford drivers. We've got a whole lot of different range of people that are going to be coming on. So it'd be really cool to see some of the comments you send through, any of the questions, and we will try and put them through our podcast as we progress. First guest off the rank is Jason from Jmacx, inventor of the Jmacx coil conversion that's in the 70 series. They do a lot of suspension and GVM upgrades in this space. Jason is a good mate of mine. We have spoken many times, and you know, he's one of the guys that I regard as a legend in the industry that we have. So Jason's our first off the rank guinea pig for this trial. So Jason, how are you?
Good, mate. You?
Good. So thanks for coming in and, putting me through this pain and do this podcast. So I thought we'll get straight into it about, obviously, Jmacx. We were recently at the Ford Drive show together, and we're having a discussion now. I always knew where Jmacx has sort of come from. Obviously been on the coast for a long time, but your story is quite interesting. So if you can give us a bit of an insight into where you started from.
So I suppose I come from an engineering background. So when I left school, I suppose if we go back that far, I started in the engineering space. But I always been into cars. You know, whether it's cars, 4-drives. You know, back when I was an apprentice, I was building 9-inch diffs for guys. You know, customizing stuff. That's just what I love to do. You know, but I got out of that and went into the building and construction for 20 years, but always played on vehicles and cars and everything in between, you know. So
it's really interesting, like starting from that passion. You know, I left school and I was a tuna fisherman, you know, for 2 years before I became a mechanic. So it's really interesting that the passion is what brought you back to doing what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I think in the journey of everybody, when you start out of school, you probably don't really know what it is you want to do, and opportunity lands and you start in a path. But then as you get older, you know, and you have kids and those sorts of things, then you start looking at different job opportunities based on, I've got to survive, you know, like I've got to pay my bills and look after my family and all that sort of stuff. So that has a bearing on where we go in the path. And I suppose we're all in that boat, you know, and I think for us, the passion behind it and all the stuff we used to do, you know, whether it was, you know, I was cutting dual cab Land Cruisers in my shed, you know, and all sorts of stuff, but I did it as a hobby, you know.
So tell me, like at the very start, obviously to go to the coil conversion, that's still out there today, but how did you start off with that? What came up with the idea and where did you go with that? Because that's pretty interesting, like starting off and going, hey, I'm going to cut my car up and I'm going to make a coil rear.
Yeah, so we got into, I suppose over the years, we got into winch challenges and bits and pieces and always playing, you know, and everyone was, you know, doing suspension and all that. And I had guys that I worked with in the industry. I wasn't in the industry as such, but from a recreational perspective, making our suspension work, going better. And I suppose we had, you know, 40 series and 80 series and 60 series and been through all that. When I sold my 80 series, just was one of those things. I needed another car, and I stepped into the new V8 76 wagon back in 2008.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, that was a fairly new kid off the block.
Yeah,
then.
Definitely a shock when it first hit the market.
Yeah, and my biggest thing was I took it straight up to, you would remember Bob from All Set, you know, and Bob used to do springs for me back in the day.
I think he was probably the go-to guy on the coast. Yeah,
100%. So, you know, I went to Bob and we did a leaf setup, and then, you know, I think we did 4-inch and whatnot, and then I didn't like it, so we went back and we tried multiple things. And Bob and I had done a lot together in the 60 series space back in the day on leaves.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, the bottom line was the leaf spring just
couldn't do it.
Didn't work, you know, short wheelbase, you know, wanted to carry a bit of weight when we towed the van up north. And
did it become pretty stiff when you sort of, especially that sort of lift and what you were doing, because you were in 76 series at the time,
Correct, that's
so it
right.
would have been pretty horrendous to drive.
Yeah, it just wasn't nice, you know, and coming from an 80, I knew better, you know, so, you know, I was actually busy. I had a tiling business at the time and I had multiple guys working for me, and I was going to, you know, ringing around going, hey, can someone coil convert this for me? You know, I'm sick of it. I want to coil it. And everyone was like, oh, it's too hard. And there was all these dramas. And I was like, it's not that hard. And the only reason I say it's not that hard is because the engineering space that I came from was a problem-solving space where someone brought something to us and said, I need this modified, fixed.
Yep. How do we do it?
How do we do it? So we're always that out of the box, think outside the box. So one year I was like, righto, so we're knocking the business down at Christmas for 3 weeks, knock all the boys off. That gave me 3 weeks to focus on doing my own coil conversion.
Yeah.
So funnily enough, I started off with a 4-link setup.
Yeah.
And like, it was great, you know, it was flexed off-road, did all those things, but geez, it was terrible to drive. You know, and I was like, yeah, it just doesn't tick all the boxes. You know, you can't really do that, you know. Yeah. So we went down, obviously, taking what Toyota, Nissan, Mercedes, everybody does in a coil conversion or coiled vehicle for the off-road vehicle that's got a high center of gravity and tows and does all those things. We went down that 5-link setup.
Yep, which makes sense.
But my thought process was, obviously, welding to chassis and things like that was always very prickly and problematic. And as we've seen, it's getting even harder. I was like, well, why can't I make something that bolts in? And that's where I started.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's where it sort of headed. And then I was only doing it for myself. Wasn't doing it for anyone. So it hit kind of social media, you know, because Facebook, I think, came out around that sort of was out.
Yeah.
And so then there was a fair bit of interest and whatnot. But I was actually quite prepared to actually hand that whole thing to somebody and say, here, you do it. I don't want to do it. I just want to do my own car.
Yeah.
It was never about making a business. It was only about my car.
Yeah.
And then I had Pen from Topper Down Under, who travels Australia doing filming and whatnot. She wanted her car done. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do it. Here's the idea. Give it to someone else to do, you know. But she kept badgering me. And in the end, I did it. So, and I think the funniest part of it was she was like, well, I want my car done, but it's got to be at the Brisbane show in 3 weeks. So I was like, right. Okay, so anyway, it was going, I think, on an Ironman stand at the time.
Yeah.
So I had 3 weeks and I got this thing done and I rang around engineers. Now, funnily enough, when I was in the modification, in the four-wheel drive thing, doing winch challenges and whatnot, one of the guys that run that is an engineer, like a VAS certified engineer, and he lived a block away. The dude lived round the corner from me. And I rang him up and I said, hey, mate, I said, I've got my car and I've done a bolting coil conversion. Can you come around and certify it? And you could hear him laughing on the phone. And I'm like, what are you laughing at? He goes, it's not going to happen, mate.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So then I approached another engineer. And when he came around, it turned out I'd done work for him 20 years previous when I was engineering, making stuff. And he said to me, he said, have you patented this? And I'm like, no, I'm not. It was never a business. It was just something I did. And he said, oh, I think you should. And I had to have a conversation then. And we sat down and we said, well, we're patenting, like that's speaking Chinese to me now because...
Yeah, you're tiling and, a whole different ball game.
Something out of the box completely.
How did that sort of make you feel? Obviously, the first engineer, and like I've been hit in roadblocks many times through what we do, and it's really funny that the first engineer to laugh. Yeah, did it make you second guess that it was going to be a thing that was going to be possible to be done, or did you're like, I'll just keep digging and trying and see where I can go here, or because to have that happen, obviously it must have been a bit of a shock, and you go, well, hey, am I looking at this all wrong?
I think probably not so much, and it's probably just because of my background with problem solving in engineering you know, people say you can't do it.
Yeah.
I'll look at it and go, there's got to be a way.
It's always, I'm frustrated with that when I say you can't. I hate the word can't.
Yeah.
I think there's always a way to achieve what you want. You just got to, you know.
Yeah, you just got to find a path. But I think too, and again, everybody's different. And, you know, some of the engineers you deal with are very, very, can be very narrow.
Yeah.
They don't like to step outside the box. They don't like to look outside the box.
I guess the liability and everything else that comes into it as well, and they were concerned about these things and trying to make sure they're doing everything by the book. And
I think so, but there's levels of engineer, and this is what I've learned over a long space of time. There's levels of engineers, like so I even still use that same engineer that recommended patenting to this day.
Yeah.
Right. However, his space is he has a specific space that he works in. When I wanted to go to the next level of federal approvals and things, I had to find somebody that had that level, and that capability, and so they all have different areas. It's a bit like you. I tune Toyotas, because that's what you've picked as your path, and so these guys often pick their path, and they kind of go, "This is my window, and this is how I'll sit in it." But so if you want to step it up in engineering, you've got to find someone that's capable. And when we say capable in engineering, more equipment, more people, more, you know, it's just, it's this blow up of this one-man band or two-man show of engineers can't do what a big company can do.
Yeah, of course.
Resources, you know, and look at technology now.
Oh, for sure. With the
robotic
robots,
testing,
totally.
Dyno trailers for GCM. Like, this is a whole new field.
Yeah. So take me back to obviously the exciting part, because you're 3 weeks out from the show and you've got to build this coil kit. Yeah.
So I got it done, and we got it done, and literally when I say the day before or whatever, and I had to.
So the engineer signed off on it?
I think, I can't remember whether he signed off on it before he took it to the show or after, because we were really pushed for time.
Yeah, it seems like 3 weeks to do it.
Because I think the big one is we'd done my 76 wagon, so we would have had that signed off, I think, from memory, and then this was a dual cab variant. So we had to do some changes to make that 76 wagon one that I'd built and designed fit the dual cab, because we obviously then had to do a single cab and a troopy. So I'm not sure where we were with that, but the big thing was, once it was presented at the show, if it wasn't patented, you couldn't patent it.
Yeah.
Your patent wouldn't hold water. So once you show it publicly, then you can't put a patent. So I'm in the yellow pages, man, digging for a patent guy, you know, and I find a patent guy that's, you know, in Brisbane, and I'm ringing him up, dude, I need an appointment like today. So we went down and we put a file in.
Yeah.
And as soon as you file that date, that locks it. No one can supersede you, jump around you.
Yeah.
But I had 3 days to do that.
Yeah, so this is all still while you were having your tiling business as well. So I'm guessing a lot of late nights and the stress up and just trying to get it through.
Functioning on, you know, probably 3 hours a night sleep for weeks.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm kind of used to it. It's what, you know, I'm always that guy that, you know, fell asleep under his car in the shed. I got tired and I thought I'd just stop for a minute.
Have a news. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, definitely.
So we got it to the show, and that's where it sort of blew up on Facebook, because people were like, coil converted 70.
Yep. It wasn't existing.
Really wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
But my thought process, I suppose, right from when I started doing my own to the next one, was, imagine if you could make this, put it in a box, and ship it anywhere.
Yep.
That was my goal, was when it started to go, well, we've got to patent it, do we turn into it? So we had to have this conversation. We got this business. I didn't really have time for all of this anyway.
Yeah.
And I had a family, and
of course, bills to pay. There's a lot of stress, and there's a lot of risk as well, you know, trying to get going.
What do we do with it? So once we decided the patent thing, we said, well, you know, we'll give it a go. I mean, you know, give it a go, see what happens.
Yep.
You know, and I always look at things and I go, well, you know what, it's a journey, and even if it doesn't work, it always you never not learn from it.
Yeah, I guess it's the failures. Like, if I look over the years, we've had plenty of failures, and it's all about learning from them. And I think that's what makes you a better person overall. You can't get good by not making mistakes or taking risk.
If you didn't fail, you never made anything.
100%. So
yeah.
I think it's one of those things when you look back at where you were in that journey about to go. And I guess there's so many emotions and things floating around your head at that one time, because not only are you working in a company where you've got, tiles and you've got guys running around doing tiling for you, you've now thinking about setting up another business, which is completely left field, but more about your passion to then move forward with that. And I guess that's the risk, is saying, hey, okay, do I drop something and pick something up here, and how do I do that,
Yeah, so. And you've got to dual manage those situations. And to be honest, it was a fair bit of time from R&D and process and to make it, then to start looking at how do I turn it into a business.
Yeah.
Like for road-going vehicles, the hoops you've got to jump through.
Of course.
Like I remember ringing, shops up, machine shops up, can you make me like spindles for a diff? And they're like, oh, we're not touching that, because they don't want any liability.
Yeah, of course.
Making your own diff in the first couple, and then looking at how do I now turn this into something that's actually viable.
Yeah.
And then I approached, some specialists in the industry for diff and axle manufacturer, and they were turning me away.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until they'd sort of rethought about where I was going and thought, well, you know what, we'll jump in and work with you. And I think that's probably the big thing with any business, the help that you get from others that probably see some light at the end of the tunnel or some sort of interest in that space, and go, you know what, this could be something.
Yeah.
Because you can't do it all on your own.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you find, you had the show, the cars went through, and you started to get a big interest of people coming through? Obviously, at that time, trying to make it cost efficient and everything else, because, doing coils in a 70 series, we knew that, the 70 series as they were coming through were very thick. And one of the biggest things, obviously, with the ride quality with them. So obviously there was a market there. You could see that was a market there. But how many years did it take to sort of pop through before you had the R&D to where you really started selling the kits out and you had that all wired out?
Probably the funniest thing that I remember was when I started, and you start working out the cost of making a diff, making some axles, building a conversion, making all the parts, then fitting it to the car. And I think back in the day we were talking 10 or 12 grand.
Yeah. And
people online were like, you're retarded. Who's going to spend 10 or 12 grand to coil converter 70?
Yeah.
That was the consensus, and that was pretty thick.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, that's fine. Let's roll forward. Now they're spending 50 grand to do it.
Yeah.
Who's doing it? Everyone's doing it. So I think you can't get caught up in the negativity. You've got to grab your focus, and you just got to just focus on that.
So once you got the patent, obviously you're the first to have the coil kit conversion. Were you guys the first to the list, I guess, to have 100%. That out?
There was no such thing apart from someone customizing or welding bits into a car. So we were the first ones to develop a bolt-in coil conversion for the 70 series.
Yeah.
So that is a first, and I think the industry, and I suppose what I take pride out of is it's changed the industry.
Yeah.
And we're always looking at how we have an effect on the industry that we're in. Do we have an effect, or are we just selling stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I think we strive a lot of the time. Like, we have plenty of firsts over the years with different things that we've done and different platforms. I think for us, it was the fact of understanding is what I loved about it, and becoming the first at doing something. It's not that we wanted to become the first, it's the fact that we wanted to understand what we were doing and make sure that we could do it the best that we could, and bringing it to the market and being the first in something obviously has its impacts as well, because obviously eyes are going to be on you guys when you got your coil kit out, and now that really does change the ball game. Yeah, so we went from making coil conversions to making the track corrected diffs. I don't think anyone manufactured them on that level either. When we went down radius arms for manufacturing, CNC machine radius arms. And so tell me this, how did you go, or how did it make you feel when you see other companies? I mean, with our industry, you always see that someone will start off with something. I think we just released, part of the heat exchangers that we've done for the 300 series, and it was really interesting that there's quite a few other companies in the market that are already copying the sort of design around that. And it's not that the fact that that's a bad thing as such, but how did that make you feel when you started to see other people coming through and copying certain things that you guys have developed?
Yeah, they say copying is the biggest form of
flattery. I don't know how that quite is.
That doesn't sit great with me, but I suppose there's no way away from people copying you. I think you've just got to, I think you just got to focus. And I think the reason they copy is because potentially what you're doing is better or greater, and I think you just got to take a piece out of that, and that's all that's going to keep you warm and fuzzy, because, it does grate on your nerves. And I think it's even worse when maybe they, they then criticize you or whatever, when they're clearly copying, and that's the problem.
It's interesting with our industry, especially in the tuning sector. It's a little bit different because it's all a lot, being software, it's smoke and mirrors. A lot of people can't really see it. Yeah. But there's been times where I've had cars come in that I'm tuning against myself from years prior. And I know this because the file's in there, and a lot of the earlier ECUs in these cars, it was pretty easy to rip the files out of these ECUs and copy the file. And I still know there's companies out there to this day that are continually using the same file they've have done for years. Just load the same file in and hope for the best. And the funny thing is, I always take from that is that, believe it or not, a lot of those tunes that I've been comparing against, I see my mistakes that I made when I was earlier, and learning from those mistakes, and they have copied my mistakes, and that's something that, we're now able to progress on and fix, because, it just takes time to evolve in that area. It just takes a lot of hours and a lot of days and so forth. And I think it's really cool to see now we're stepping into what we call Gen 3, which is 300 series, the new 4-cylinder in the 79 series, the later 2.8 in the Hilux, and now even the Tundra with Gen 4. These systems are a lot more complex, and we have a lot of things in place where we lock down a lot of the stuff so it can't be copied, and that's pretty cool to see. Obviously, we brought out multi-mapping, which is a first, and that's we have that in that platform, and we see that that's something that's really cool for the full drive industry, especially with towing, and especially GVM upgrades and everything else. It works hand in hand, which has been good. But it is good to have the fact that now we've got a bit of security there for us moving forward. But unlike yourselves, you've got a component that it's a hardware component. I mean, you can pick it up, grab it, you can scan it. 3D scanning nowadays, like, it's not hard to get, 3D scan. I think you can pick them up for $1,500, and you pretty much go through and scan the product. And here you've got a CAD program that will pretty much print that off. And that's a scary thing, is that you put so much effort and time into a design, yet it's so very easily copied. And the hard thing about that is that my fear is that someone copying products, then obviously sending them overseas, and you're all trying to keep manufacturing here in Australia, and it doesn't, it's not hard for a company to do that and send that overseas to get that made to compete against you. And I think that's just the reality of how it all works. It's something that it's quite sad in itself that that's what happens. I guess you just got to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, and I think you just take that little bit, where you've, look back and go, well, we've brought some first to the industry, change the way the industry functions. We saw that a bit on our GVMs, where we were adding bigger axle loads and actually fixing the differentials to give the axle loads and giving real world axle loads on GVMs. And no one else was really doing that. And so now that's becoming more common practice, when you do something, fix the brakes, fix the axle load issues, all those sorts of things, and then I think, for us, we wanted to step up the shock market, and we brought in the full in-cab adjustable electronic shocks.
That's probably, that's really cool. That's game-changing. I mean, you think of now with the Toyotas, they're, in the GR series, they're trying to do similar things there. Obviously, it doesn't have the same adjustability as far as what you've got, but it's interesting that, the manufacturer has gone down that way as well, and that's something you can offer in, a 70 series cruiser, even a 300.
That's been available in the race car world for a long time, but no one had actually brought it into the recreational four-wheel drive market. No one had actually brought it in, but a lot of people talk about it, but I went, we want to do something new. We want to set the mark to be ahead of the game and show people what we can do, and I think that's always what I'm looking at is, okay, we've made a product, but don't just sit on it. Can we make it better? Can we improve? Where are the niches in the world to make things better?
I guess that's what sets you aside from everyone else, is the fact that you know, that drive and that push to always, you know, try and be better than you were yesterday. And you're competing against yourself a lot of the time.
And I think you can't sit there and count the cost.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about it. People go, oh, what do you spend in R&D? I'm like, I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah, it's one thing that people have asked, and I can't honestly answer the question. I think the hundreds and hundreds of hours and cars and stuff, and it just goes on and on and on. But it is so worth it. And to be honest, that's part of my enjoyment, is the R&D. I love developing. I love understanding. And for me, that's my best way of learning, is going through the process.
Correct. Actually coming out with a result.
Totally.
And I think that's, for me, the kick that I get is, you know, something that we've done that no one else has done, or something we've made, then we can go, that's something new and something exciting. And I think without that, it's just a business.
Yeah, 100%, without a doubt. Yeah, So something which was really cool, I think, that for me, I always knew you guys did the Coil, but it was obviously the 6.6 conversions what really started to set you guys apart, and you could see that you're doing something there that was definitely different. I mean, if you look at 70 Series Cruiser, there is literally nothing you can do, or everything you can do to those cars.
Yeah.
You look at, they do tracks, they do all sorts of stuff you can do for those cars. So obviously going into a 6.6, was that something that was more, again, a passion, or you had an opportunity to do so, or how did that come about?
So, funny story. So back in the day, I used to do a bit with Len, who was one of the original owners of Creative Conversion. Like, Len helped me, another good guy in the industry, been around for years, wealth of knowledge, and he would assist. And he said to me one day, you need to meet this guy on the Gold Coast. He's doing this cruiser up, and he's off his head, he's full on. Anyway, so funnily enough, I don't remember how it all happened, but I was down the coast doing a few things, and I went, I'll drop in and see him, who was Justin from Patriot.
Yep.
So I called in and I said, I'm here. I just thought I'd catch up with Justin, blah, blah, blah. We got a mutual friend, Len. Anyway, he wasn't there. They rang him up and he goes, I'll be back in half an hour, whatever it was. I want to talk to you. And I'm like, righto. So I said, I've got stuff to do. I'll come back. So anyway, eventually we caught up and introduced himself, whatever. And he goes, just to be clear, my car is finished. It's built. Suspension's in, everything's done, but I'm curious. No stress, man. I said, I'm just here, take the car for a drive. I'm just here to show you.
Yeah.
We didn't even get out of the driveway. He says, how much? And that's where it started.
Yeah.
So from that point, we started doing a bit with Justin on his black truck and whatnot. Anyway, so when he was taking that to the shows as his Patriot, I suppose, super tourer.
Yeah.
He was getting bombarded. He goes, dude, I am sick of talking to people, asking me about this Coil conversion stuff. I'm so tired of it. And I said, look, if you like, we'll come to the show and we'll run a bit of interference and whatnot. So anyway, so we're at Cairns and the show was kind of winding down and we were just sitting back for 5 minutes and he goes, what now? And I'm like, what do you mean, what now? He goes, well, the black truck's done. I need something new. And I mean, anybody that probably sees Justin, he's full on and he has a goal and he just heads for it, And I'm like, I don't know, man. I said, what do you want to do? And he pulls out a photo of a 6x6 G-Wagon. He goes, can we do this? And I was looking at it and I went, well, I said, we can kind of do anything, I suppose. I said, but let's have a look at it. Well, this dude does not sleep. So he's like Sunday texting you, how we going? I'm like, dude, just chill. Because I've now got to work out how to design a 6x6 system.
Yep.
How to work the 6x6 drive-through side of it. So I was up, nights and
there's a lot in it. There's a lot in it. It's definitely like another car. You're just jamming on the back of it.
Correct. Yeah. So there was a bit in it. So there was quite a bit to do. And then, we ordered some parts, bits and pieces from the US, and there was not that there was problems, but there was things that weren't the quality that wasn't there and bits and pieces. And we decided on what we were doing. So I headed down this path with this 6x6. And I said, that's cool. I'll build one for me and I'll build one for you. And you build the trays and canopies, which is what P-Core, I suppose, took off to be. Yep. So that was the deal, right? And, of course, Justin, he got carried away and he wanted portals and whatnot. And his car obviously was that car that's on LMCT to give away.
Yeah, I saw that,
However, we had to get this thing engineered, certified, all through the hoops, which is massive.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think I was at Len from Creators one day, just dropped in or whatever, and I bumped into Brad McCarthy, who was the owner of Jmacx Tracks. And Brad was like, oh, I need you to meet this guy, who turned out to be Mick McMillan from AEV. So Mick was, 30 years military defence, I think vehicle procurement and 6x6 and whatnot.
Yep.
And Mick said to me, I need what you do. Can we help each other? Great.
Start a relationship.
Yep. Based on a handshake.
Yeah.
That
they're the easiest ones as well.
You can
without
only,
the contracts and everything else.
100%. A bit of paper means nothing. You can only work with good people.
100%.
Most of the people I still work with, I worked with from the start.
Yep.
All based on a handshake.
Yep.
And those relationships never change because it's about, do what you say you're going to do and do the right thing by each other, and that's how you work.
Yeah.
So Mick comes in, he goes, I can help you with engineering. That's my background.
Cool.
So cool.
Yeah.
So here, and so now that was the process. So now we had the idea, we had a lot of the design stuff coming through. We're already building differentials and chassis stuff. So we started down manufacturing those bits. And then the certification part, well, that's where Mick came in, and that's where we headed with that. So.
Yeah, and then that's where it started. It's funny you should say, like, looking at the Patriot 6.6, because that's what really, I mean, if you think about that, a 70 series, right, with the setup, it's like every other 70 series. Like, there's so many different combinations you can do, but to add an extra pair of wheels, it's quite funny how that then completely changes that car. And obviously, and even the funny thing is that everyone's like, oh, well, is it as good as they are? But, I've seen and I've spoken to a lot of people with 6.6s, and they say how good they are off-road. That's amazing. Having that extra set of wheels makes such a big difference. And I think that's probably what a lot of people are wondering is it capable off-road? Is it as good as what people say it is? But I remember talking to you once, and you were saying how, you tow your boat up the beach in bits and pieces, and you said the thing just never gets stuck. It's. I
mean, never get stuck is obviously, is a bit of a loose term. I've seen Justin Bog is in, so they're a heavy car. So but from a drive perspective, you just point it, engage the 3 lockers, put it in low, let it go.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's like. So, I think Justin took his up the Telegraph track. I think it is at, or one of those tracks at
Glasshouse.
But also the ones at Cruiser Park.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
We took our 6.6 up a lot of tracks, like I think Little Red and all those. And they basically, you don't drive them, you just engage them and let them go.
Yeah.
And it's surprisingly enough that the 70s are quite a narrow platform, so it has good visibility and it's not as wide as a lot of cars. So it is actually surprising. I mean, I've had mine with the 2 rear wheels backed off an embankment to take a sharp right turn at the top of a track. Doesn't matter. Let the wheels hang off the back.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
So they're not that big. I've had them in places where guys with patrols are scratching their doors.
So at the show, I realised, because you just sold your first 6.6 that you built, and you had that for some time, didn't you?
That was my first 6.6 that we ever built. So obviously that one with the Patriot truck. So that was mine. I didn't ever have intentions of selling it, but as business goes, we need to keep forging forward, and having cars just sit around that we're just not getting the use out of.
And so the Brisbane show that was just recently on in March, you obviously released your new 6.6 there. And that was built pretty quickly, because I knew you had a new 70 series, which you've got new cars all the time, and you're always doing R&D and so forth. I had no idea that was going to be the 6.6 at the show. So even for me to see, I was like, wow, that happened quick, because it was just I remember seeing it, and I swear it was only a few weeks prior, and it was just a bone stock 79 series, no tray, nothing, sitting out there with a sticker still on it. Tell us how you went with that.
Well, we had vision to build a new concept on the 6x6, and I ordered a J7 when they came out, which was mid 2022, I think. So we ordered that, and I'd already built that into a 6x6 platform and had it sitting in the shed waiting for other parts and stuff. And then they released the facelift, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I was like, damn it, I can't build
on the old
shape. I just can't do it. It's got to be new, and it's got to be the current spec. So hence I had another 6x6 sitting in the shed doing nothing that I said. So I ended up selling that to a fella in Kenya, which I think you guys did a full tune and package for.
Yep.
And then they said, okay, we found you a V8, new shape. It's going to be here, I think, beginning of January. Well, the beginning of January turned out to be February, turned out to be, I think, March. When was the show?
When was
March
the show?
16th.
It was, yeah.
I think we got that car in the last week of January.
Yeah.
It was already behind, and so we were just running.
Yeah.
So obviously,
because you got it wrapped as well, so you got a wrap on it, and it's got
PPF, yeah,
it's got Boss canopy on the back of it, and it's just got all the gear in it, and it's like, man, that happened really quick, and it's even got an auto in it as well, so it's like these things happen very quickly.
Well, I suppose the Boss tray canopy side. So we've been doing a lot of work with Boss in Melbourne over the years, with our 6x6s and stuff, and so he already had kind of everything in play for that tray canopy setup, except for one thing. I wanted it to be a bit shorter.
Yeah.
And then I wanted it to be really wide. So he had a few mods to do, but because he had that, he could kind of get running on that fairly quickly.
It's pretty amazing. I think when we were speaking to them down the show, that they literally just had that set up, shipped here, and you bolted that thing on. That's amazing. Like to get everything where you got fuel tanks and water tanks and all that bits and pieces and have it all ready to roll where it can just bolt on. That's pretty amazing. Like, you know, you think of all the R&D and the time that's gone into actually get that to be right.
Unbelievable. And, you know, like when it comes pre-wired where you literally run battery power or power from your alternator, ignition source to that. The thing's set up with central lock, fridges, inverters. You know, it had awning, rooftop, already all bolted on, all ready to go. And it's designed, CAD designed to specifically go straight onto our chassis. So we got that turned up one day, the next day it was on.
Yeah.
And then all we had to do was run power to it.
I'm always amazed by the processes and the procedures they have to be able to get from a bare bit of aluminium and build something so complex and have it shipped to someone just exactly like your kits, and they can just bolt it in and it's done. You know, it's pretty cool to see.
It's a lot of time, and it's amazing. Like, I know when we're doing any incremental change, one change will affect 6 other things and those little changes, but if you don't keep making those incremental changes, then it never gets better. And a lot of people will make a product and then they'll go, it fits, it works, and they'll stop.
Yeah.
They won't keep picking away at it.
Yeah.
Even us as a business, whilst our core conversion is exactly the same concept process of what we did back in the beginning, minus little tiny tweaks, like a little bit of relief here, or the chassis have changed and we need to modify slightly to overcome a weld or a bracket, but you keep picking away at it because the whole idea of it, and this is where we were with the 6x6, I can put a 6x6 in a box, send it anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can be fitted.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
So bolt-in core conversions, even our 4495 chassis setup, and which we do now, we do armoured for that. We do that for 6x6. So we put it in a box and we ship it.
So obviously the canopy's on, 6.6 is done. We understand you've changed it to, is it sandy? What's that colour that's on it?
It's actually, so PPF's only been available in clear and a matte finish.
Yes.
And it's only just started to come out in colours.
Right.
So we went up to Wrap Masters up at Kiwana, and they showed us very limited. It was very, very limited. So the colour that I originally picked didn't float, and so we ended up with this gold, which looks like almost sandy, but
yeah, it is. At first when I seen it, I was like, oh, sandy, and you get a little bit closer and you're like, actually it's not. And then I was like, oh my God, it's actually wrapped. And I was like, oh, there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
So that was cool.
And I think I lent on a lot of the guys around me at work, you know, and that because I was just, I couldn't make a decision. It was too hard, and I had no time. And you know, so it was just one of those things. So, but PPF, so it's that self-healing. I think there's 7 to 10 year.
It's pretty amazing stuff nowadays. You see that, and we're starting to see a lot of 4-drives come through because it's a big investment. You know, these guys are spending, 150 grand on a car plus, all the other mods that add up. And like I tell guys, it's like having Ferrari sitting around in your workshop. Yes, they are Land Cruisers, but the worth of them is there. And I guess that's definitely something that we're starting to see is a lot of, getting away from all the paint protection and going to more PPE sort of wrap sort of style stuff.
Well, I think you need to. And I mean, I've had wrap cars for many years and they damage the paint.
Yeah.
And they don't last.
Yep.
So wrap, I always said I will never, ever wrap a car in vinyl again.
Yeah.
However, the PPF, with its qualities of protecting the paint and self-healing is ideal for the application. And like you say, spending a lot of money on these vehicles. So, it's protecting your investment 100%.
Yeah. So you've got the car wrapped, got it back. Obviously, was it 6.6 at that time?
I think we put the chassis on it,
Yep.
and I think we rolled it up, just rolled it on a dummy axle to get it there because
Yep.
we only had I think he wanted it for 7 days out of that.
Yeah,
what did we
right.
have? So it had to be in the show like the 13th of March. Where
Yep.
It had to be in early because to get into our stand, we've got to get past ARB and everybody else. So we're the first in.
Yeah.
So I think we just got the chassis on, we'd wrapped it, and we put on dummy set of wheels. We sent it there. You know, then I wanted snorkels, twin snorkels. I did
Yep.
that on my first one.
Yep.
And so the guys at King's Custom Fab who were next door,
Yep.
I was like, I want snorkels and I want air boxes and I want them now.
Yep.
So they're like, oh, running around. So we did.
So obviously a lot of people in the car working pretty much.
No, we gave them the car for
cool.
X amount of days.
Yep.
And like I said, it was a tight ship, So, but we were just running everywhere from the middle. I had, cruiser consoles making me consoles. I got, the Cerakote that does my shocks. He's Cerakoting all the plastics black in the interior. Pro seat. I'm like, dude, you can have the seats, but you can't have the car. He goes, oh, that's not how we work. And I'm like, this is all I can do. He goes, we normally fit everything. I'm like, well, it ain't going to happen, So it was just full on. But yeah, we were working. I think, we were working. My workshop boys just stepped up.
Yeah.
They just stepped up and they put in some big hours.
It's pretty crazy to think that you actually drove that car into the show ready to roll. And it's, there's there.
Yeah, it's, and it's only at its stage one.
Yep.
So, next stage is portals. So the boys at Jmacx are developing a new portal axle,
Yep.
which are alloy.
Okay.
There'll be a higher load rating, which is what's been missing in the portal axle.
Yep.
So we're heading down that path. But we're widening the stance on that thing by about 300 mil. So it's going to be fat.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Shortened it, widened it. And you would have seen those jungle trekkers we built for Indo.
Yeah, 100%. They were pretty wild looking cars.
Pretty sick. Yeah. So, but I think I always relate to that G-Wagon. I mean, everyone looks at that G-Wagon and goes, look at that. And we had the opportunity to do bits and pieces on a G-Wagon where they were trying to convert them to 6x6s.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at it going, this is madness because we make it in a Land Cruiser.
Yeah.
Why would you? I couldn't get around the fact that these things were there was so much involved in them. They were so oddball. Everything on them was odd and just different.
Yeah, I think even from like doing a European car, that's something that I love about Toyota, and you would probably agree with the engineering and how they do things. Yes, they're probably very simple, but they use quality materials. Everything's metric. It's just it works, it flows, and for years of working on those cars, they're just a pleasure to work on, and that's the one thing I love about Toyotas is that definitely had experience with Mercedes and so forth, and a beautiful German engineered car.
Yeah.
Definitely not a problem, but the downside is that I hated working on them. I hated doing anything on them because it was just a little bit left field for what I was used to. So I can only imagine how hard it would be to do a 6.6 and something like that.
Yeah, and I just I don't know. To me, there was just a lot of work going into something that was oddball that we already make.
Yeah,
we already make it. So why are we reinventing the wheel? I mean, you can take that 70 series Land Cruiser, you can paint it, wrap it, change the interior, put Recaros in it, you can put portal axles on it, you can put, there's trays and canopies straight off the box. You can do anything to that car. You can make, how much horsepower can you make out of it?
Heaps. And the thing is, and let's face it, the 70 series is, the ultimate car. Like when it comes to, it's really funny, like, for example, I've driven quite a few 6.6s that have come through the shop. And, when I'm road testing them, it's amazing the amount of people that are just looking over at you and going, oh, wow, look at that. That's unique. That's different. And you're literally getting swiped by people trying to take photos of the car all the time. Like
it's something. Camera out the window.
Yeah, totally. Like you can be driving around in a $300,000 car, whatever. No one even know, but you're in a 6.6 79 series. Everyone, knows you're coming. So,
I've had the wagon.
Yep.
The single cab, the dual cab. I wouldn't trade my 6.6 for the world.
Yeah, right.
So, and that's, to me, that dinosaur, doesn't matter where you are, it's simple, it works.
And I guess that's the thing that we're also experiencing. And one of the reasons why we went Toyota only was a lot of guys, you've seen the American trucks coming through, and we see a lot of people making the decision to go to them. And not that they're a bad decision to go to. Those cars are quite big, but, parking one of them, like we just got the Tundra at the moment, and going from a 300 series to Tundra, I can barely fit in any car park. And it's really funny how our roads and our systems are not really designed for that size car. But rolling into those cars from, say, a 70 series is that you can be out in the middle of nowhere, and all cars, anything mechanical will break down at some stage. And it's always the worst point where you break down in a car. But the good thing about the Toyota platform is that you can pretty much go into a farmer's backyard, back shed, and he'll have a spare part. He'll definitely have a set of wheel bearings or something like that for your 70 series. Unfortunately, with a lot of the cars that are coming in through now, we just don't have the parts here or the accessibility. So, you take, any of your American trucks to someone, in your local mechanic shop, and they'll be ordering a part. It might be 3 weeks or wherever it's got to come from. And again, not that it's a huge problem, but these are all things that we're faced with. And I think that's why Toyota is so strong in our country.
I think it is a problem when the lead time, we've been, because we dabble in Rams too, obviously. And we see it, can't get brake pads, can't get a wheel bearing.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of that. And not that they're a bad car.
Yeah.
They're not supported like Toyota is here. And I kind of don't, I'm of the opinion that I don't really think that that's going to change. The reason for that is when you go out of suburbia, out of the metro and go rural, these guys they don't look at what Toyota brought out in there. They don't want to know that it had another cup holder or that it had an added feature. They just go, can I just have another 79, please?
Yep.
I'll have another 79. And they don't sell the old one. They put the old one out the back.
Yep.
And they keep it. And everywhere you go, that's the consensus, because they know that there's a dealership in every rural town. Parts are there.
Yeah. Peace of mind.
When we're remote. America, they can ship overnight, here, there, everywhere. You try to get something from Brisbane to Perth overnight, there's no such thing.
Yeah, it's like Perth, the other side of the world. It's definitely, it's so different.
But overnight, that'll be 3 days.
Yeah.
So why am I paying you for overnight? It's so that's where we live.
Yeah.
And so we do a lot of stuff in Africa, the UAE, and places like that as well. So they're very much 70 series based.
So obviously coming in from the V8 series model, the VD, and then now we're coming to the 4-cylinder with the 2GD or 1GD motors in the auto. Obviously, the 4-cylinder's been a massive, obviously, shock to the community, especially 70 series owners. I've actually bought one through our shop as an R&D car, and I believe you've got one as well.
We've got one.
I have my own opinions on them. I'm really curious to see your opinions on them. So we'll start with you. So what do you think of them?
Look, from when you pick it up and drive it, it actually drives really well. Mind you, that's unloaded. So I think for our perspective, when we're working on GVMs and suspension and tow capacities, we've got to look at what that engine and box is capable of. We've been out testing at GVMs of up to 4.5 ton.
Yep.
Whilst I think they will do all of that all day, and our testing has kind of shown what they're capable of, you're not going to get the GCMs and the tow capacities, and because the engine's just not big enough to do it. That rolling mass, pushing that rolling mass, that engine's going to be under a lot more stress. It just has to be.
Yeah, look, it's funny you should say that. There's always, the debate about, the cubic capacity and so forth. The first impressions when we got the 4-cylinder, I was thinking it was going to be a lot more sluggish than it was, considering what the Hilux was like. Obviously, we're quite shocked when we drove the car. We're like, hey, this is actually pretty good to drive. We've done a few little things to it with tuning and so forth, and we've got the power level to be increased. We're going through all the R&D process at the moment for temperature, trying to maintain temps, and that's something that now we're adding so much load to that we're starting to monitor and really understand what these cars are going to be capable of. So that's going to be interesting, like you said, especially going up a big hill. We've got a 15 kilometre, sort of like 5% grade gradient hill. When you're lugging for such a long period of time, how is that going to do that? Is it going to do it well? And we know, the VDJ can do that, and it's been doing that for a lot of years. I guess the 4-cylinder's got a lot to prove in itself. I don't believe Toyota ever go backwards in anything they do. Like if you go through all the models of Toyota engines they've ever made, I think they all have I can't really say, there's a couple of engines to mind that I don't really like, but a lot of them are really, really good in both petrol and diesel platforms. So it will be really interesting to see the outcome of the 4-cylinder. But so far, I'm extremely happy with how they drive, and being the fact, I think it's mainly based around the auto. If it was a manual, well, yeah, that would probably be a lot different. But because it's auto, getting in a 70 series with an auto is like luxury.
And it's got 10 speeds.
Yeah, so, it's really good. So, yeah, I guess it'd be really interesting to see what happens in that space.
They're only new, I suppose, for everybody. So I think, and I think, remember back when everyone said when the V8 Cruiser come out and everyone was going, it's rubbish,
the FTE.
By the FTE. And people were banging on. We saw that on social media, FTE. And I went, that'll stop. That noise will stop once people understand what they're getting, and then they start to see the improvements that people can do once we get hold of those cars and start to really open them up and see what they're capable of. And now you never hear it.
I guess it's the 300 series thing with the 200 series as well. Like that was definitely a big one. Everyone's like, hey, we're stepping backwards, where 300 series without a doubt is my favorite car on the road. Like even if I won the lotto tomorrow, I'd still be buying a 300 series. But that's my own opinion. I just love how they drive, and I love the cars. But yes, you don't have that V8 sound, and that's something, we're going to probably start to see more smaller capacity engines and a lot more petrol variants coming through, especially with hybrid, and I think that's going to be coming through in the next few years, so that's going to be interesting to see how that develops.
Yeah, well, I think the only person that hates on a 300 is the dude that paid drug money for a 200 right at the end there.
Yeah, it was actually really funny when, obviously that COVID time was an interesting time for everyone, I think, and, I remember paying, I think it was around 82 for my 200 series with VX, 2016, something along those lines. And like I sold the car to my brother-in-law for 85, I think it was at the time. But the car, when he ended up selling, he sold it for quite a fair bit more. And it was just crazy, the value of those cars. But what I like to say to a lot of people is that they always ask me, what should I buy? And I always say Toyota, is because it's the only cars I've ever bought in my life that actually retain their value. And that's something that's very special about the brand. And in those cars is that, I've had other brands of cars and you just lose all the money. It's gone.
Well, they jump up every year in value as because the new car. I mean, look at the 300. I think that GX 300 was about 90 odd grand when it first came out, and they're probably 10 or 20 grand more dearer now.
Yeah.
So they keep getting dearer, so it keeps holding that value. But what I always say to people is, when was the last time, let's use a 70, when was the last time you saw a 70 on sale?
Never.
End of year run out?
Never.
Last year's model sale? No, that's the price.
Yep.
Pay the money or buy something else.
It is interesting. You can go from dealership to dealership, and it's just pretty plain cut. But I kind of love that. That's the culture about the car and how they are. So
yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about? Did you want to talk about shocks and stuff like that in bits and pieces? Obviously, that's another story in itself. Getting into that space, because that's probably more, from the suspension components to the shocks going down that path. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I think probably for us, starting where we started, and it all comes down to numbers. When you start, like anything, your numbers are low. As you get bigger in numbers, you get more and more people coming to you wanting to offer your product, etc. And I remember back, we would sell high-end shocks. We would sell very few. We just weren't seeing that market. But then as we grew, there would be more and more market. And then the amount of high-end shocks that we were selling was huge. I think we were one of the highest retailer of some of the top brands in Australia.
Yeah.
The problem that I kept coming up with, and it's not quality issues or anything like that, it was more the backup supply support. And it didn't matter whether it was shocks or whether it was, anything that comes from overseas has been problematic. It just, and I kind of believe in that world of, in the US, I kind of believe that Australia's not even a blip on the radar. I really don't think they, when you talk to them, they kind of don't really care. We're not even.
We don't have the numbers. We're not in volume of people. We're just not there.
We're just not there. So the lack of interest, I suppose, is a problem. And as we've progressed through everything, we've made more and more stuff. We're going, we just need to take control of our own destiny, where it was affecting our business. So if you've got something and there's 50 parts to that something that you sell, one part missing makes the whole thing fall over. One part.
Yeah.
So you can't be left hanging or, with no supply, no support. You just can't have it. So, we went down, and this is a path where I would just, I just said I need to take control because it's just not getting better. And we see that in other spaces that we're still dealing with. We're going, we need to take control because we're not getting the answers or sometimes there's a product issue and they're not listening.
Yeah.
And they're not the ones copping the brunt. We're copping the brunt. Of
course, yeah, without a doubt.
I think we went through that with, some of our sway bar links where we've been through multiple suppliers and then they're just not listening, and they're not acknowledging and stuff. So we went, well.
It sort of forces your hand, doesn't it?
It does. You get forced to do it.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like anything. If we're going to survive, we need to take control. We need to jump in with both feet and give it a go.
Well, product and customer service is everything in my opinion. So, definitely if you've got products that, you're having problems with, it's definitely the most important thing to address moving forward because it's your name, it's your brand, it needs to be upheld.
But I think the problem that we've got in Australia is everybody's going overseas and I've seen it where guys get something developed in Australia.
Yep.
Straight away, bang, send it overseas, get it made cheap. There's no manufacture here. How are we supporting jobs? You look at the trades. Try and get a tradesperson in some of these skills. We have a shortage of trades.
Yeah.
We have a shortage of qualified people. We don't make anything.
Yep. It does make it really hard, especially, that's a whole nother subject, but, in this country with, getting things made here at the right price, it's just, and even when we do, so trying to get the quality as well and making sure that things are good,
Yeah, and some are, because everything's coming from China now, everyone's expecting massive profit margins on everything.
Yeah.
And it's just not achievable with Australian-made products. But if we as a whole in Australia don't support Australian made, look at our farmers.
Yeah.
Where are we going?
Yeah, for sure.
We're going to be owned by overseas manufacturing, probably. And I think people often too, they go, oh, this is an Australian product. No, it was made somewhere else and it was put in a packet here.
Yeah, yeah.
No, let's make it. So, and I see it online, people going, oh, Jmacx, their shocks are made in Thailand or China or whatever.
Well, I know where they're made. I've seen them. So
they're 110% made on the sunny coast here. And
it's pretty amazing. You think of the facility where they're at, it's well set up, it's done really well, and it's awesome to see.
Well, it's over doubled in growth on its own, just the facility to make the shocks.
Yeah.
So, I think at the moment we're manufacturing something like 500 shocks every 6 weeks or something like that. So it's grown really quickly. I was a bit expecting it to be slower because obviously there's brands on the market that have the brand name.
Yep.
So they run off the brand name and everybody goes, well, I'll buy because of a brand name. So we had that fight to see how we would survive in the market. But at the end of the day, for me, it was more about focus on our own product, on our GVMs, the things that we wanted. And here was probably the clincher. When you buy shocks from somewhere else, they don't do with their vehicles what we do here. They're still reliant on you giving them the feedback to say, this is what I need, this is the weight of the car, this is the rear axle, where they don't fathom that.
Yeah.
They just go, oh, you buy a Ram 1500. Oh, if that's not big enough or doesn't carry what you want, you go to a 25, you go to a 35.
Yeah.
That's how they think.
Yeah.
We go, I want to take this Land Cruiser, I need to carry an extra ton. They don't think like that.
Yeah.
So we've now got to go, we need to build a product. So we were already specifying the valving and designing things and saying, this is how we want the configuration. And so we were doing all that already. All we weren't doing was physically making the parts.
Yeah.
So then all we had to do was find the right people. And find the right people, which took some time, who had some expertise in specific areas. And I think that's the problem. You can't grab everything and say, I'm an expert, I know how to do everything.
Of course.
You've got to go, this is what I want to do. Let's find people that have expertise in those areas and utilise that.
Yeah.
And then you got somewhere to work to. But manufacturing it here, we have full control. We can make a change so quickly. We just keep going and just keep changing and working and just keep going and don't stop.
Yeah, right. That's really cool. All right. So future plans. Tell us future plans. What can everyone expect to see from Jmacx moving forward? Obviously, there's a lot of new models that will be coming out on the market. We've got the Tundra and so forth, and that's a space that looks like it's going to be fulfilled in the next couple of years. Is that something that you guys will be looking at as well?
Yeah. So obviously, at the moment, I think we're knee deep into Ranger, DT Ram. As far as SSM stuff, obviously the 4-cylinder stuff's in that mix as well.
Yeah.
Looking at, but yeah, Tundra's definitely on the hit list for next vehicle.
Yeah.
And I think, personally, the Tundra will wipe the floor with the American 1500 pickup market. And the reason I believe that is Toyota support, Toyota reliability. But here's the thing, the engineering on the suspension, chassis, body, all of that stuff, the full quality of that car supersedes all the American stuff without even blinking an eye.
Yeah, yeah, but that's just Toyota engineering in general.
It is, and that's why we like them.
Yeah, definitely.
However, I see once Tundra comes here from the dealership side, it's going to wipe the floor with your other American trucks. I can't see it being any other way.
Yeah. Look, I think they have a lot to offer. Their platforms, as far as their motors and gearboxes and drive lines that are proven, they're bringing out obviously a hybrid version as well, which I think is going to be really cool to see. A lot of people assuming it's electric, but, you've got this powerful V6 twin turbo petrol engine, and then you've got the hybrid system that's assisting it. So especially for towing on highway. Now, the problem with petrols was they would have the power, but the consumption was always the problem. Adding the hybrid, you're picking up the consumption side. Yeah. So I think that's something that will start to sway a lot of people in that direction. Also maintenance costs, like as much as I love diesels, but yeah, they are higher maintenance costs and so forth. And when you sort of put that all into one package, I think that it'll be really interesting to see the sales of those cars moving forward.
Yeah, look, and I think the electric vehicle space is an interesting one. I mean, we're seeing all the time the cost of resources that it takes to build electric.
Yep.
Versus the other way.
Yeah, look, I just don't think electric, in my opinion, will survive or be here in the way that probably the media portrays it to be. We don't have the setup to have those cars, going around Australia. When we talk remote Australia, I'm sure we've all seen posts and so forth of generators running, charging stations out in the desert. And it makes sense because how else are you going to get electricity? You've got to have those things set up. But it's not viable. I don't think it's a viable option, not for where we are in this country, but it'll be interesting to see what comes from that.
Well, we're doing stuff in Africa at the moment for safari vehicles. I think they're government safari vehicles, and they're HZs.
Yeah, right.
70s with HZs because they don't have the fuel quality.
Yeah.
New
Is that like Fiji as well?
I think
I remember we went at Fiji probably a few years ago, and they had it looked like a VDJ, like bonnet scoop and everything on it, and I was like, wow, it was like $45,000. I'm like, man, that is so cheap. And I had a look at how to want to use that in, and I'm like, wow, that was definitely a shock.
Well, New Guinea's the same.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So fuel quality, I think, is the issue. But yeah, so I mean, whilst we're sitting in our little bubble in Australia here going, emissions, whatever, you've got to be able to support it on the ground with the infrastructure, or again, like in those countries, it can be fuel quality or whatever. So, I think it'll be interesting.
So probably the last thing would be, if you had someone starting a position, say in a business right now, what advice do you think you could give them?
I think if you're going to, I think failure comes from defeat. You just got to push forward.
Yeah,
and I think that's just focus. Don't focus on what's coming at you. Because unfortunately, the world of social media has created a platform where people can say whatever they want with
no repercussions.
But not just no repercussions. Some dude could be giving you advice that doesn't know his ass from his elbow.
100%.
How do you differentiate what's credible
and what's not?
And what's not?
Yeah.
So you've got to you can't listen to the noise. You've just got to pick it, run with it, but align yourself with good people.
Yeah, I think the good people one is definitely there. And also having a passion. Like, I believe having a passion for what you do makes a huge difference. And probably learning from your failures. If you don't learn from your failures, well then, unfortunately, you're not going to pick it up next time.
Yeah, you can't let your failures stop. You just got to pick it up, deal with it, keep moving and keep forging ahead. But I think, honestly, I think the biggest one is surround yourself with good people. Only deal with good people. If they're not good people, find someone that is, and they're the guys that will, because there's guys in our industry. And I found when I started, our industry is quite savage. It's a very savage place. I've never experienced anything like it.
Without a doubt.
The more successful you become, I think the worse it kind of gets a bit. But there's really good guys in the industry that have been in the industry and, that have made their way through the industry, and they're happy to help.
Yeah.
Happy to give you advice. And I think you take that advice and ask them and get the help.
Yeah, I think that's something you see at the 4Drive show, like a lot of the guys that you tend to meet through, and there's a lot of like-minded people and so forth. But it's really, there is a lot, but in saying that, it's amazing how there's very few at the same time of these guys that are decent guys.
Well, you can be a direct competitor with a guy and still work together.
Yeah, 100%.
And still help each other.
Yeah.
It can still happen, but then there's the other side.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's the thing, probably the biggest thing that I take away from our journey of where we've come from and where we are now. Only work with good people. And if they're not good people, move on and just keep looking for that.
Yep, that's cool. All right, well, that's a wrap up anyway, so we'll leave it at that. So thanks for coming in, mate. Appreciate it.
Easy.
Being my guinea pig.
All good.
Follow us up on Just Autos, Facebook, on our socials, Instagram. If you want to see any other content or have any other questions, please feel free to message us. I'll be more than happy to have a look over that stuff. But thanks for staying tuned.